All righty. Going to talk about introductions and conclusions today. And as with, everything I've been telling you about this paper, it's not so much what they do as what they can do. All right. There are some things that should be done in a proposal essay. By the time the reader is done with your introduction, they should understand what the problem is, what solution you are proposing. Okay. In short, your thesis should be delivered. Okay. And then notice I didn't say thesis statement. That implies a sentence. A thesis is not a sentence. A thesis does two things at least, and potentially a third. A thesis names the topic and it delivers an opinion about the topic. Okay. Which is to say, here's my topic. There's a problem associated with it. Here's what I am suggesting as a solution. Okay. That's the have to do stuff. Then the third optional thing is to provide a preview of the structure of the support. This is probably most important if you are going to provide and what I will refer to as information dense paper. If you're going to use a lot of facts and statistics, if your paper is going to be more loosely based around narrative examples and personal stories from yourself and others, you might be able to get away even in a paper of this length without a formal preview of structure. If you present a preview of structure, it should be just that, which is to say it should be in the same order as the body of your paper. What you're doing is you're like building a bookcase, right? And shelf A is labeled one thing and shelf B is labeled another and shelf C is labeled something else. And then your reader takes the information you deliver and puts it on the shelves. Okay. You don't want to confuse your reader by presenting one order in the introduction and then another order in the body. That's disorienting. You are essentially building them a framework for the information you're presenting, and as long as it holds true, they can anticipate what's coming, they can help fill in perhaps gaps. But if you violate it, then the reader's trust is also violated and you lose a little bit of ethos, perhaps a lot of ethos, depending on how bad it's violated. Okay. So those are the three things thesis does. Um, Two in a required kind of way and one in an optional kind of way. Now we get to the what it can do. Okay. And this is the kind of the exciting part. And this is going to depend a lot on your topic, on your problem, on your solution, and whether or not you are trying to evoke pathos, ethos, and of course logos, which you will to some degree evoke all of those. But what you might do, there are a few sort of things they say that are good for getting a reader's attention, right? And this is the really important work of the first paragraph, because an introduction is not necessarily a single paragraph. It can be one, two, three, maybe even four paragraphs long. Okay. In the first paragraph, in the first sentences, maybe even in the title, you want to start to interest your readers so that they want to keep reading what you have to say. An opening paragraph might be a personal story about your topic, okay? And in that case, it might evoke pathos. It might also supply a little bit of evidence in the form of here's what this person witnessed, or here's what this person is doing. And it might actually be starting to build what we would call evidence, which we usually think of as the body of the paper. But a good example is going to do a little bit of support work as well. Okay. Another thing that is sometimes recommended to start a introduction is to provide a startling statistic. Okay. A little bit of alliteration there for you. A startling statistic. And again, this is to make the reader think. And you don't want to provide something they've probably heard before. Okay, this is something that's going to go, hey, wow, I've never heard that before. So they want to keep reading, right? Um, in fact, the one thing you can do really bad is to start with an overly broad, everybody already knows that stuff kind of an introduction, right? Because then people are going to go, oh, I've heard all this. This is going to be boring. I don't want to read this. Now you want to really wake them up. Another thing that you might do is supply a quotation that should be very appropriate to your topic. Okay. You don't want to just pull some random piece of stuff off the internet and throw it at the top of your paper. It should be appropriate to your topic. It should be appropriate to your lines of reasoning somehow. And you're going to use that to introduce your topic and to start people thinking. Okay. So again, an example, personal or otherwise, and when I say personal, I mean yours or someone else's personal, a startling statistic, a quotation, something, or just even really very good language. Maybe use one of those small rhetorical devices, present a metaphor, give them a comparison, a creative comparison to something else, something, get that reader's attention, make them want to continue. Also, in the introduction, you might find that you are going to, in the definition of your problem or your solution, you might have to provide some general background material. Save that until you've got their attention, right? Don't start out boring them. Get their attention first and then provide what necessary background you have to. And this might, depending on your subject, if you're dealing with a subject where there is a lot of unfamiliar terminology, you might have to even define some terms. Um, be aware that not all readers are going to know what those big words mean. Now, we're not responsible for defining every big word we use for our readers, but if they are what we refer to as jargon, specialized language associated with a field of study or an occupation, you probably should define some of that, unless it's, the use of the word in that profession is very similar to its general use. Something that they're going to be able to find in a dictionary pretty easily. Okay, background information and definition. If your problem solution is very close to something else, you might have to define that line in the gray area which you have stepped over, and that's where you want to take your reader to. Okay, so we've got the notion of get the reader's attention, necessary background information, delivery of thesis. There's another thing or a couple more things that an introduction might do. If you are writing about a topic with which you are very familiar and you are going to present yourself as an expert, a knowledgeable source on the topic, the introduction is the time to do that. Start your ethos building right there. Okay. And then the other thing, and it might serve as a transition into your support, the body of your paper, is to address opposing views. And again, this has to do with ethos building, right? Recognize those opposing views, even if you're not going to rebut them, right? If you are going to rebut them, then this is obviously a lead in to your own support. But otherwise, build the bridges with those audience members who hold those opposing views. Tell them, I respect your opinion. I see some validity in it, but I think this is a better way. Okay. And then use that to launch into your support as well. Again, we saw this in the Rogerian model, when we read the textbook, as opposed to the debate model. The debate model, or the oratory model, as our book refers to it, reserves re- rebuttal to, well, reserves opposition views for the end of the argument. When you're going back and forth in an argument, a conversation or a debate, that works, but it doesn't work so well to withhold them in an essay until right before your conclusion, because you don't want your reader thinking more about the other side than about your side. You want to present those up front to build bridges and to put your ideas in between that opposing view in the end of the essay. All right. So those are another quick review. All right. So we introduce our thesis. We define our topics by providing background information. We might build ethos or personal credibility in regards to being a educated voice on the topic. And we might present opposing views. All of this part of our introductions. And then we move into our own support. Okay. And of course, after the support, we get to our conclusions. Oh, and I forgot the most important thing: get the reader's attention. Because one of the things that conclusions do is also reconnect with the reader. Oftentimes, the body of our papers focus very specifically on our topic, on our problem, on our solution, and they tend to leave the reader a little bit on the outside. You want to reconnect with the reader in the conclusion. Some of the same things might apply. Okay. One of the things that you can do is use a quotation. But if you use a quotation, it should never, ever, ever be the last words of your essay. The quotation instead should appear near the beginning of a conclusion to open it back up, and this might be a quotation that people are familiar with, that they see it and they go, I know that. And then you use that again. It needs to be appropriate to your topic and your lines of reasoning. But you use that to kind of open the conclusion back up and bring the reader back in and into the equation. Okay. Again, never your last words. This is your essay. Take possession of it. The last words a reader hears should be your own, not somebody else's. Another thing you might do in a conclusion is this might be where you work to enable the reader to take action. You've proposed a solution. Now, what is the reader going to do about it? And this means that you are talking to the reader again, just like you were kind of in the introduction, hopefully a little bit at least. You maybe use the you pronoun or the we pronoun, right? The inclusive first person plural or the second person pronoun you, so that the reader really feels like they are being addressed. You want them to feel like this was for them, not for an assignment, right? So those are the things that you might consider doing. The one thing with a conclusion you do not want to do is just present a review style conclusion where all you do is review the main points of your essay. Man, that's just mind numbing. Okay. These aren't that long. Now, you might consider a couple of sentences of review of your main points. Again, if your paper has been heavy on statistics and brief facts. Okay, review the main points for them. Let them know where that it's a good indicator that this is the beginning of the conclusion when you do that. But more importantly, you're thinking about the reader's memory burden. Have I stressed my reader's memory so much that they need a review before I proceed to wrap this thing up? If they do, provide one. Keep it brief. A whole paragraph of review is undoubtedly too much. Okay. Unless it's a very brief review paragraph, And in that case, it's working more transitionally between the support and the conclusion than it is anything else. Um, Personal stories, again, yours or someone else's, can be a very effective part of a conclusion, especially if you are trying to evoke pathos. Maybe in the introduction, you only delivered part of a personal story, of an example, and in the conclusion, you deliver the rest of it. Okay, so that helps bring what we call, closure to the essay. It's actually what we refer to as a framing device. When the paper starts and ends, and I don't mean the last sentences, but the conclusion includes some of the same information, okay, or a continuation of a story that you began at the beginning. A framing device acts as bookends for all the material that's in between, right? So just again, be aware that that's a possibility, and it can lend a nice sense of closure, but you don't want to snap the lid shut too tight. Okay. And again, this idea of reserving the last couple of sentences for your thoughts, um, and for connecting with the reader. When the reader leaves the paper, they should be thinking, there's a problem, there's a solution, and I can do something about it. That's what you want your reader thinking when they get done with your essay. All right. So that's, again, introductions and conclusions are not about absolutes, about must do this, about must do that. They're about possibilities. Okay? Everything we do as a writer is a choice. And what we are attempting to do is clear, meaningful communication. That's what rhetoric is, good communication. Take advantage of your introductions and conclusions to really highlight that and really connect with that all important audience that is going to do something about your problem.